Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first in a series of Top Performer webinars. And so welcome. You've been invited here today because you are signed up to the early bird list. And so that means that you will have early access to all of the suite and, of course, the brand new client interface too. So before I kick off, just a quick bit of housekeeping, which is to say that you should have a dashboard on your screen. And so if you do have any questions at any time, or you're having trouble hearing me, for example, then please do let me know. There's a questions button, so you should be able to type your question in there. Of course, I'll make sure that we have time at the end of the webinar as well for a bit of a question and answer session in case you have any particular questions about any of the tools. The webinar itself should last between 20 and 30 minutes, depending on how many questions there are, so we'll make sure we get through it all quite quickly. So this is what we're going to be talking about today, and essentially it's a bit of an introduction into the suite itself, first of all. And so we'll be looking at the design process, so what went into making each of the assessments, but essentially we're going to be talking about what exactly are the tools measuring and what assessments do you have at your fingertips. Then we'll move on to a tour of the new client platform. So this is a brand new interface which has been under construction for the last 6 months or so. So I'll be showing you what's available now. And also we'll just briefly touch on what's coming up over the next 2 to 3 months. So as I say, it's brand new, and that means that there's going to be lots of new functionality still kind of being added over the next few months or so. And finally, we're just going to briefly touch on implementation and interpretation. So once we've talked about the tools and how you send them out, we'll have a bit of a talk about how best to start using them and implementing them, and how to understand the reports that are the output of the tools. So this is what the design process looked like, and the first step is always a discovery journey. So when we're designing anything, whether that's a psychometric tool or a more consultative kind of assessment center exercise, for example, we always start that process with a discovery journey. And essentially what that means is that we talk to many industry experts to really gather their insights and really start to understand everything we can about that role, whatever the role is that we're designing a tool for. So in this case, we wanted to design a suite of assessments for recruiters, but also for salespeople in the recruitment world. So we spoke to lots of industry experts, recruiters themselves, their managers, to really start to build a picture of what makes a great recruiter, what sets them apart from the rest. So we really wanted to understand what makes a recruiter great, but also just a daily life as a recruiter or a salesperson in recruitment. So what types of things do they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis? What situations do they find themselves in? And what's the best way to overcome those challenges or situations? So the next step was to take all of that insight and use it to guide our design process. So we took the information and used it to create 3 different tests. And that is a scenario-based test, or an SJT, and then a verbal and numerical reasoning test too. So all of those were designed specifically for the recruitment industry. So once we had all of our material created, of course, we send it off for a pilot phase, and that is basically to ensure that it's looking good qualitatively, so get lots of feedback about the scenarios, how it's running in terms of the platform, just to get some kind of verbal feedback about it. But it's also important that we run some quantitative data too. So we need to make sure that it is, the results are interesting and it's gathering kind of reliable and accurate data too. So that was an important phase for us. The third phase, or actually meanwhile, our developers have been super busy working as fast as they can to build that brand new client interface, which I'm going to be showing you in a few moments. So working in the background to really redevelop the client journey. And so the fourth stage is where we're at now, and essentially it's your turn. So you're here today because you have signed up for early bird access, and this means that you have access to both the tests and also the platform itself before anybody else. So we're really excited for you to see them, but we're also really excited to hear your thoughts and feedback on any part of that process. So this is the top performer suite of assessments, and you can see that there are 4 in there. So there are 3 that we made specifically in this process, and then the 4th one, the personality questionnaire, is slightly different, and I'll come onto that in a moment. So the first one, the SJT, or scenario-based test, there is 1 for each stream, so recruiters and sales in recruitment. And essentially, it's a series of different scenarios, all based in the kind of recruitment sphere, from which the candidates have to choose from a selection of answers the way they would deal with that situation. So it's a really fantastic way of understanding how they'll behave in that role. And it's also a great way to give them an insight into the types of tasks and scenarios that they'll be facing if they're through or successful through to hire. You can see that it's called Message Me, and that is because we have designed it to be in the format of an instant messenger platform. And so these scenarios will come through to the candidates in the form of text messages from their colleagues, clients, or managers, and then they choose from a selection of texts the way in which they want to respond. So we chose to create it like this because we wanted to make sure that the candidate experience was as engaging as possible, and we're always keen to make our tests kind of friendly, intuitive, and really just as fun as they can be for the candidates, all as part of our sort of candidate is king philosophy. The next one down, verbal, is essentially a classic verbal reasoning test, but adapted so that the reference material is all recruitment focused. So we're wanting to keep that recruitment theme throughout all of the tests. And so all of the questions that they're answering are based on case studies taken from the recruitment world or recruitment industry. The next one, numerical, is much the same. Again, it's a sort of classic numerical reasoning test, but based around reference material or reference data taken from the recruitment world. So again, making sure that that recruitment case study is there throughout the whole journey. And finally, the personality questionnaire. What we've done here is create a really short and punchy personality questionnaire, just 9 scales, so it should take them only about 9 or 10 minutes to complete. And these are mapped to the key recruitment competencies that I'm going to be coming on to in a couple of minutes. So they're just a really short questionnaire to gather some more insights and more information about that person's personality at work. So one thing to mention about the personality questionnaire is that we've created this kind of speedy one because we know that it's a fast-paced industry, and we wanted to make sure that it didn't take your candidates too long to go through all 4. But of course, you do have the opportunity to include a longer, more in-depth personality questionnaire if you want to. So if that is something that you're interested in and you're really keen to gather lots of insights about their personality at work, then that's definitely something that you will be able to do on the platform. So this is the model. As you can see, it's based on 4 quadrants, and these are really the 4 areas that came up through that discovery journey that we mentioned earlier, that were the key predictors of success in this industry. So these are the 4 themes that came up again and again. So the first one there, empathy, what we're looking at here is really that person's approach to building rapport and building and maintaining trusting relationships with their clients. And so being able to adapt their interpersonal style to others, for example, but really looking at how they deal with those interpersonal situations at work. And so we measure this one with the SJT, that scenario-based one. Indeed, we measure all 4 competencies with the SJT, but also their verbal reasoning score feeds into this empathy quadrant too. The next one, round, focus. This looks much more at dealing with the demands of the role that include things like managing multiple projects, managing their time, and really the key thing here is being able to deliver high quality work in a pacey cultural environment. So being able to maintain that quality whilst working quickly at the same time. This one is measured by the SJT. The next one round, resilience, again, something that came up again and again in our discovery journey, but really what we're looking at here is their ability to adapt to a constantly changing environment or constantly changing circumstances, whether they can thrive under pressure, whether they can navigate challenges with determination and maintain an optimistic outlook. So much more of a kind of looking at their grit and their resilience in that role, being able to take something negative, get back on the horse and carry on, that kind of thing. And again, we measured this with the SJT. Finally, the final quadrant, results orientation, is much more about understanding whether they're able to make judgments based on their business awareness and profit understanding. So really looking at whether they are able or have a preference for meeting their goals and targets, and of course understanding their influencing skills. So in a consultative customer environment, we want to make sure that they're making right decisions in terms of influencing people around to their point of view. This one, again, is measured by the scenario-based assessment, but also the numerical score will feed into this section too. So I'm going to take you over to the platform itself, and you'll be able to log into this by going to my.psycruit.com, and immediately you'll be able to see this dashboard. So before I show you the interface, just to let you know that the first time you log into here, there will also be a kind of pop-up instruction manual, so it will take you through where to click, where to find each important thing, and you can X out of that if you kind of already know your stuff. So the first thing to mention on your homepage or dashboard is the kind of candidate activity references. So here you can see a graph that details the campaign activity. I've selected all campaigns, but you could select a singular one if you wish. And so the account that I'm on currently is a trialing account. So you can see that there was a huge peak in activity whilst we were trialing the exercises, and then that's dropped off since trialing has finished. But if you as a client would be more likely to see a kind of more stable, slightly undulating, but stable graph line on this graph. Down here you can see some more detailed information about your campaign activities, so references to those that have started, in progress, and candidates that have completed, a breakdown here, and then a further breakdown on a per campaign basis, where you can scroll across and see the breakdown of candidates that are green, so kind of very high potential compared to those in the more average or typical scoring bands. And if there were any that were kind of scoring quite low in this campaign, you would see them here. The last thing to mention on the dashboard is this top right-hand corner box here, which is very important. And this is the rate performance box. So as your candidates start to go through, you will notice their names start to appear here. Again, this is a trial version. But as they complete, what we would like you to do is to give them a performance rating, whether that's based on an interview or preferably their performance in the role if they're successful through to hire, and also let us know whether they were hired or not. And so the reason why we'd like you to do this as clients is so that we can start to collect that data and then run some stats in the background to start to build up a really interesting picture about what it is that's predicting or is predicting the highest success in your unique organization. So we have a really good idea of what predicts success overall in the industry, but by collecting your unique data, we can start to look at that and then feed that back to you and then start to build some tools that are kind of specific to you. So it would be a really, really great source of data if you could complete those ratings for each candidate that goes through. So if we head to the campaigns tab, this is a record of all of your campaigns, and you can see them all here. You will see 4 in your early bird access, and so those refer to the sales and recruiter versions, some with the personality questionnaire and some without. So you could just click whichever one you were interested in, and then over on the right hand side you can see some options. So for example, you could click quick link, And then you could send this on to your colleagues or candidates so that they can sign themselves up. So a really quick and easy way to get people through the platform. And of course, there's the slightly more traditional way of adding them here too. You can also view campaign. So here you can see everything you need to know about the campaign, its passcode, the support email, and of course the different types of tests that it includes too. If we head to candidates, here you'll be able to see all the people that are going through your campaigns. Again, you can see that this is a trialing version, so some fake names here, but you can see that it's immediately obvious those that have finished but not been rated, those that are in progress, and those that have finished and have been rated. So this is a bit of an overview, but if you wanted some more detailed information, you could just click their name, scroll up, and then view candidate. So you can see their scores immediately here. You could also rate this candidate if they haven't been done already. In this case, they have, but this is the all-important view online report. So here at the moment, of course, it's just the top performer report because that's the campaign that's available. You would click yes, generate report, click view report, and then that's here ready to go. I'm going to pause here because I'm going to show you the report in more detail in a moment. We'll head back here for now. You can also add a candidate on this page. So if you wanted to, you could add one here rather than on the campaigns page directly. The last page to mention is the performance page. And essentially, if you haven't done the performance rating on the dashboard, then all of their names will appear here, and you can do that here too. So that's a quick tour of the functionality that's available currently. And as I've mentioned, there will be lots more stuff coming soon, including things like building your own campaigns, of course, your own personality questionnaires, a marketplace for you to share questionnaires and information. But of course, we will be in touch with you as and when that becomes available. You as early birds will definitely be the first to know. So I'm going to head back to the slides for now and move on to the outputs. So we've looked at what the tests are, we've looked at the platform from which you administer them, and this is the output. So it's a really short report, it's just 2 pages, and in here you can see immediately the overall performance index, so that takes into account all 3 of those tools, assessment tools. And then below here you can see the breakdown in terms of the competencies, so empathy, focus, results orientation, and resilience. So you get a score for each of those. On the second page, there is a different breakdown, and this time that's per assessment, so a score each for their SJT, numerical, and verbal, and then some information about what that means in comparison to the recruiter norm group. So it's a little bit hard to see on this slide, but at the bottom of the first page there is a link that says how to kind of interpret this report here. And so if you were to click that, you would see this page. And essentially what this does is that it is a page giving you lots and lots of guidance about how to interpret that report. So guidance for each competency, but also just some important points to remember when you are looking at any kind of psychometric data. So some key things to have in mind. So I would definitely recommend that you read this at least for the first few times of using that report with your candidates to make sure that you're reading into it in exactly the right way. One final thing to mention on scoring is that when you're looking at the scores, these aren't sort of arbitrary scores out of 10 or 100 or how many they got right versus wrong. What you're looking at is the individual candidate scores compared to a large group of their peers. So we're benchmarking their scores against industry top performers, hence the name Top Performer Test. And so that's really what you're looking at here. You're looking at how they compare to the top performers in the industry. So we'll finish on some implementation ideas. And of course, you are free to implement these in any way that you see fit. But we're happy to give you some advice for how we think these types of tools work best. So what we would advise when you're implementing these assessments is to get them in as early as you can in the process. And so really, we'd like to see you using these at that application stage, even before the first interview. And so the reason why we recommend this is so that you have access to all of that information as early as possible. And that means that you can choose to use that information at any of the following stages, and potentially at multiple stages too. So you have that information and you can use it to guide your decisions going forward. And so some of the ways that you can use that information, there are many ways, of course, but I've mentioned two here. And the first is that you can use what you gather from the top performer suite as a bit of a selection tool. So especially that overall performance indicator is a really good way to have a look at your candidate set in total, and immediately start to see those that are having really high potential, the kind of green scores at the top, compared to those that are, you know, somewhere in the middle, sort of typical performance, and then perhaps those ones that are a little bit lower. And so just by looking at that score on its own, it can be a really simple and effective way to make some decisions about who to take through to the next stage in the process. And then once you've done that, so perhaps you've chosen a few to take through onto the next stage, so an interview, for example, you can then use the deeper level information, so the competency breakdown, to really dig deeper in that interview and start to gather lots of concrete evidence as a kind of backup to what they've said in that psychometric. So for example, if we've seen a really high empathy score in their top performer report, we could start to ask that person some questions during an interview to ask about that in practice. So can you tell me about a time when you've had to build rapport really quickly? And so just by having those conversations, you're gathering lots more really interesting evidence to further build a picture of whether they're going to be the perfect person for the role. And finally, we would also, as I've mentioned, like you to implement that performance function as well. So making sure that you do review their performance either at interview or further down the line if they're successful through to hire, and let us know whether they were hired or not. And again, this can help us start to build a really interesting data set that we can then feed back to you in kind of useful and interesting ways. Fantastic. So we've raced through that to make sure that you have time this afternoon, but we do have plenty of time for questions. So if you have any immediate questions about any of the tools or the new platform or how to implement the tools, then please let me know in the questions box on your screen. If there's nothing coming to mind straight away, then of course you can get in touch at any time. We have a chat function on the website. There's lots of just kind of interesting information on the website itself. Of course, you're welcome to call our office and get in touch via email too. It doesn't look as though too many questions are coming through right now, but as I've said, get in touch if you do have any, and I hope you all have a really wonderful afternoon.